With no selling sales, one of the most difficult things I've found for people to do is to face their fears and say the things that other people are not willing to say. I see this all the time as I was touring new home builds, new constructions the other day, and obviously they have salespeople in the office. And the clients were asking some simple, very direct questions like, does this come with a refrigerator? And I noticed the salespeople there, instead of giving a direct answer, which is no, it doesn't, they would normally like spin an answer. They'd spin an answer in certain different ways of like, well, is most people would rather a rate buy down and most people would rather this, instead of just answering the question straightforward and saying, no, this home does not come with a refrigerator. And I find whenever you start to do these, an agent was showing me a sales training manual from another brokerage the other day, and everything I noticed, everything created friction and everything was like trying to spin an answer into a yes rather than just giving a direct answer, which sometimes will be a no. Now, what you'll find is it's very, very scary and very difficult to say to somebody, no, actually, this unit, this home, this commercial space doesn't actually have what you want. This is what it is. And here's the things wrong with it. And here's the issues that I see. But once you start doing this, once you face those fears, and I understand it's difficult to do, you may be thinking, how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to get the sale in? How am I going to make money this month? How am I going to hit my target? And you start saying things that aren't untruthful, but are skewing the situation to be how you want it to be rather than talking absolute truth. And what happens is once you face this and you start facing your fears of saying the things that nobody else is willing to say, is you'll notice that whoever you're dealing with, client, customer, or individual human, they'll start to relax a lot more and they'll trust you because they know you're going to say the things that they're worried about hearing, and you have no filter for that. And so I found that with me, when agents start touring with me, they'll say, "Oh, I was never allowed to say that at my last brokerage," or "Oh, I was never allowed to say that at my last company," because quite simply, is it's the truth. And so I found that when you start to tell people, look, this is the difficulties or this is the issues with this decision. And I always say to people, look, I'm extremely pessimistic when it comes to any deal. I'll look for every single way that something bad's going to happen and let you know about it. And then that way, at the end of the day, is within what we do, we can recommend any home, any apartment complex, any commercial space. It's not our job, I believe, to convince them to purchase this one in order to minimize our time. And now this is very, very difficult. I always say to people that the thing people struggle with most in specifically real estate is they have to put the client's needs ahead of their own, and they have to put the client's schedule ahead of their own. And I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with me on this, but I find the more and more I do this, the more and more easier it actually becomes to do a larger volume of deals and to help a larger amount of people. And it sounds so strictly straightforward, but I always think of it as if it was my mom going to buy a house, or my sister, or sometimes, my daughter. What is the advice that I would give them? And what would I say to them in this situation to make sure they make the best decision with every possible variable that a lot of the times are bad. And I find that even once you give people bad information, technically termed bad, but really it's just the truth of the situation. Is after you do that, I find when people are touring with me, initially they kind of have their guard up. Okay, what's this guy's play? What's he going to do? And the second you start to use these the way that I saw these salespeople doing it, is we toured three different communities. They ended up going with the third one. The issue was with the other two is the salespeople were being so pushy and so uncaring about what they were actually looking for rather than trying to solve the problem, that they ended up repelling the deal. It ended up being the less expensive option, but really is they didn't feel comfortable, like anybody wouldn't, because you can't. And you've been in the situation, everybody has, when you just can't get a straight answer out of somebody. And I think culturally, specifically here in the United States, it's a very big thing, and I think it's a very bad thing because I noticed when I got here, the difference is what I experienced a lot of in England is when you talk to a salesperson, they kind of look over their shoulders and be like, hey, I'm not really supposed to tell you this, but I know you're looking at this one, but this one over here is a little bit cheaper, and it will actually save you some money if you go with this one. And I found whenever that happened in the UK, you normally ended up going with that one. And also as well, you're like, oh, this person's looking out for me. They're trying to help. Where I found culturally, it's a little bit different here because it always seems like people put the corporations, and it is a corporate run country, it is corporate America, but they put the corporation's interests ahead of individuals. And this is normally something that I have to detrain from agents and people who work with me, is start to put the individual first. You'll always be cherished and you'll always be applauded for getting the one that offered the less commission, or getting the deal that, was less expensive, because essentially you did the right thing. And so here what I find is whenever you're looking at anything, for some reason you always end up at the most expensive one. They're always trying to push it a little bit. And just this pushing, I think, creates tension. The way I like to do it is I'll always keep somebody within budget. And as I'm showing them options within budget, there may be one that pops up and be like, look, this one's here. If you want to see it, it's out of budget. I'm very conscious of your budget. I don't want to keep you out of it, but they're asking us if we want to go see it. Are you comfortable with that? Or should I tell them no? Normally at this point, it's, yeah, no, let's go check it out. And I probably say 20 to 30% of the time they end up going with that option. So it does happen, but it's definitely not the majority. So what I've found, what really gives me a competitive edge on a day-to-day basis is, let's say you were working, and this happens a lot of the time on the apartments. I'm on a phone call with somebody that has been talking to a lot of people. Maybe they've talked to 6, 7, 8 different agents. And I had this one time where the guy was basically talking to 9 different agents and having them all send him options and this, that, and the other, and he was dealing with everyone. And so when I spoke to him, I said, well, what have they sent you? What do you like? What don't you like? And he's like, well, this one. And I remember saying to him, oh, the reason they're suggesting that one is because that one actually pays double the commission of all the others that you're looking at. And he was like, oh, really? That's interesting. He's like, is it a good building? I'm like, yes, it is a good building, actually, but they do pay double. And there's that one that's really good. I can show you this one that actually pays us half, which is another good comparable option, but they pay half. That's probably why the other realtors aren't recommending it. And that's probably why the apartment locators that you're dealing with aren't suggesting it. But it's in the same area and it is a good option. And with this gentleman, it was a snow day. And I said, look, you're new to the country. Let me come meet with you. We'll grab a coffee. I'll show you how the whole industry works, because he's confused. He's thinking people are trying to charge him all these extra, like maybe he pays more working with a realtor. So I sat him down. I showed him all the commissions that all the apartments paid. And I said, look, this is the one they're recommending. And here's all the ones they're recommending. And shockingly, they're all the ones that pay the most. And he's like, oh, that's interesting. So anyway, we ended up going through it. And I said, look, this is how the industry works. We get paid this way. This is how I work. And he's like, okay, cool. He went with the most expensive one that day, the one that paid the most. He didn't care, but because people were trying to turn it in a different way and trying to tell him, oh, this is definitely the best one. I said, yes, that is one of the best ones, but this one here is equally as good. But I found that by cutting through that and saying the things, people never want to talk about how much money they're making off of a deal, or you're not supposed to ask these things. On a day-to-day basis, I ask people, monthly incomes, credit situations, very personal questions. And I feel like if you're not going to allow that door to swing both ways, then you have no justification in doing it. So when somebody asks you, oh, okay, what's the deal with this and that? I go, look, I'll take you to see this building. By the way, heads up, this one, really doesn't pay. I've even been to buildings before that don't pay. And what's interesting is I've told people beforehand, and then they've asked and they've been like, well, why are you showing me this building and why don't they pay? I said, well, a lot of them don't like to work with realtors. Well, not a lot. It's, on the management side, it's normally the worst management companies that don't. And then they say, well, why don't they do that? And I'm like, well, some, like to reduce their prices and just not work with realtors. It's a decision they choose to make. But what we found is there's normally a correlation between those companies and them not wanting to pay for other things as well, like maintenance and gardening. And if they're cutting their expenses one way, they're going to cut it across the board. So from my experience, people love to do clean, honest, straightforward business. They've wanted to do that since the start of the time. This won't change with AI. This won't change with the internet. People still want to do the same sort of business, which is fundamentally what we all look for. And if they have their person that they know is going to tell them the things other people are afraid to say, then that's the person they're going to go with. When I was interviewing lawyers, is everybody was, as I was interviewing them, they all told me everything I wanted to hear, other than this one who told me all the bad stuff. And that was the lawyer I ended up going with, because I don't need a sales pitch from a lawyer, right? I need a straightforward, this is the situation, this is what you do. And I just think that's the sort of people that people want to do business with. So with no selling sales, say the things other people are afraid to say, because you'll find on the other side of that door of fear, you'll find that there's a lot more success. And that's probably where a lot of the success you're looking for is hidden, is on the other side of the things that you're afraid to say. So please don't be afraid to say them.